Hi, I'm Sug.
And I'm Dan.
This is the Demystified Zone. Hey Dan, guess what?
What's up?
We just recorded our 25th episode. Can you believe it?
Man, it seems like just yesterday we started.
And we just got our 25th listener.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks to 25 moms out there. So if you're listening to this and you still listen to us, please do us a favor. Talk to 5 of your closest friends. If you only have 3 friends, talk to those 3 people and ask them to subscribe and like our podcast wherever you get podcasts. It'll help us a lot. It'll help Dan get his mom off his back.
Please, Mom.
Leave him alone. Chebal. Hey, welcome back, Dan.
Hey.
We are here in Champaign, Illinois.
Feels like home.
Yeah, second home that we left and ran away from as young children. It's that kind of home. For you listeners who don't know what's going on, we're in Champaign, Illinois tonight with a special guest, Minkyung Kim. She is a professor at the University of Illinois. She has a PhD in communication. She's a professor of organizational communication, something that I once took long ago in this campus, but probably did not do too well.
we could pull up his grades, right? You have access to that?
Please don't. Please.
Maybe I do, but I wouldn't go there.
Okay. Since you brought it up, I have I don't know if this is in the files. Maybe you could look it up later when you get your secret access.
If you could.
FERPA violation.
Yeah.
I'm giving you permission for one of my semester projects. This is embarrassing. I did a video. The class was on like macro communication and organizations, and I did mine on the McDonaldization of society. My assignment was I took a video camera and I went around campus and I interviewed students on trivia questions about McDonald's, and then I was just like goofing off the whole time. It was like street walking with like one of these like late night talk shows. It was just like a comedy bit. It was hilarious, but I got like a D. Because in the end the professor was like, no, you didn't like address any of the things. It was funny. I would like go to like the quad and be like, hey, can you name what a number 4 is in McDonald's? And then I'd ask, do you know how much McDonald's makes in a year? It was like Billy Eichner and like,
Yeah.
Billy on the street,
Right,
just really in your face, kind of, no?
Well, I know what that is.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was entertaining. Would you give me a good grade if you saw that? It had nothing to do with the assignment, just fun, good humor.
I mean, humor has to resonate with the core of the assignment. So I would kind of check.
You sound just like my teacher right now.
Because assignments are created for a reason, right?
I feel like I'm about to get a D
again.
objective. Uh-oh.
I still get dreams of missing a test or showing up naked to class?
I will say my wife does.
Oh, she does.
She
okay.
still fears that. You can tell how little respect I had for the academic. I do not. I never feared that even when I was in school. I would just show up. To this
day, like I'd say twice a year.
I will say one day I showed up in like literally like almost my underwear just because I was so late to class. I just had to be there. I just didn't care.
What?
I'm pretty sure I was like in a boxer shorts and my robe.
Okay.
and like maybe a naningu. I'm not even joking.
Just like a white.
It's just a tank top, undershirt tank top, in my boxers, a
beater,
a big robe,
and
slip. With someone, if a student showed up like that in your class, do they do that to your class? You're teaching the high level stuff.
Yeah,
they would not dare.
I mean, I've seen some pajamas.
Yeah.
On like, I don't know, during finals exam week.
But did anyone wear a robe?
I've actually seen a robe with the pajama, but she was running late that day.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
Running late. I just kind of didn't care.
Yeah. And that was also exam day, so I think she was in a hurry.
Mine wasn't exam day. Mine was a regular class day.
Wow.
I just went and I said, you know what? This is what I'm wearing today. But that gives you an idea of what kind of student I was. No dreams or nightmares of me missing a test or anything like that. Okay, I digress. I'm sorry. More on Minkyung. Our lovely Minkyung is coming back here. If you guys listen to the episode prior, we
Please
talked.
listen.
Yes, it's oh my
Amazing.
gosh. We're doing 2 because there's so much she has to share with us. She just a quick recap. She is literally from all over the world. Spent most of her life growing up in South Korea in Seoul. Was born in Germany. Her family has been in academia. Her grandfather rather was North Korean originally, who had to run away before the war started. Here's a cool fact she shared with us before, and I hope this is okay if I share this. Is that your great grandmother, potentially
great grandmother,
2 greats, great grandmother, breastfed Kim Il Sung.
Yes.
As a part of it. Can you explain that better? I'm not doing it justice.
Sure.
Tell us that story again.
It's like literally a village raising a child.
Yes.
When Kim Il Sung was first born, and this is the story that I heard through the family anecdotes. So there's no way of verifying how it happened.
It's good. We don't fact check anything on this show. So,
So
we're good.
I'm also just really relaying the storytelling that I heard, growing up. So my grandfather's grandmother, which makes that woman my great grandmother. So when Kim Il Sung was born, his mom was really weak from childbirth labor, and she wasn't able to breastfeed the little baby for quite some time. So instead, the village women kind of took turns breastfeeding the little boy so that the boy can live and survive, which was really a common sort of village effort at that time. Does not happen anymore, but Korea in the early 1900s, that was sort of the village norm. They help each other. It's a collective effort to raise a child. So yeah.
So her great grandmother breastfed the man god himself, Kim Il Sung.
Yes.
Dan, what did your great grandmother do?
She breastfed my great grandfather for sure.
Anyway,
Crazy.
Minkyung, thank you for being back with us. I know
Thanks for the invitation.
we're wasting
Great
our
to be
time
here.
now. On this episode, we want to talk about something very specific. Dan and I have been wanting to talk about this issue for a long time. We wanted there to be the right person, and we feel like you're the right person. I think you're the perfect person, actually, to discuss this with us. So, listeners, today you're in for a treat because you won't get to hear Dan and I talk for the full amount of time. You get to hear someone else who knows what they're talking about. We want to talk about the issue of comfort women. Okay, comfort women. Dan, give us the skinny of comfort women and why this is important to North Korea and South Korea, really, amongst other Asian nations. So just trigger warning, listeners.
Yeah.
This is, we have a good time here. And we
It's a
try to
pretty
bring
heavy topic.
light to all topics, but this is just, I just can't, you just got to respect this issue, but we do want to bring it to light to everyone, and so people should know about this. This is really important. So go ahead, Dan.
Okay, so during Japanese, they occupied the Korean peninsula. Back then, it was just one country of Korea. In the early 1900s, through World War II, when they were defeated and sent back. So, but during that time, they were on an imperialistic effort to basically take over the world of Asia, at least, and perhaps even further. And it was very cultural as well. It was very like cultural superiority, that sort of thing. And so as they took over Korea, they set their eyes on China, and their war efforts, they said, well, our soldiers need all kinds of resources. One of them are women to have sex with, and so they sent young Korean women or girls, some would say, to the front lines to service their soldiers, and this remains one of the major sticking points between South Korea and Japan, and even North Korea as well. North Korea has Japan remains in their most evil countries list, and it's because of this period of occupation and things that they that they did. I will say that Japan, in their own way, has apologized in their own way. That's very, it's very important to put that caveat there. In their own way, has apologized. These apologies have fallen short of the expectations of, most importantly, the women who have come out as women who were traded or sent. These apologies were not good enough. And so both to the shame of the South Korean leaders who accepted these apologies and Japan themselves, they have continued their campaign of railing against Japan to get an appropriate apology from them.
And if I could just add my own personal anecdote here, and this is not really an anecdote, but the idea of comfort women, to me, I had to learn about this in school, which is kind of like, Dan and I were talking about this before the show. It's really very Korean that we don't know anything about our own history. Our parents don't tell us anything. And we thought that was Korean American, but apparently it's just Korean. But that is a good chance, if not, I think I heard this anecdote from a relative that spoke with our grandparents, specifically our grandmother, that was very familiar. And basically my grandmother, who grew up during the Korean War, there wasn't a woman that didn't know someone who was affected by this, being a comfort woman themselves or knowing someone who was forced into this atrocious thing. So it was very ubiquitous at the time, and it was very commonplace and terrible. But what's also terrible is like we, have hidden that reality. Not that we always want to dig up bad, but there are some things we should know about. And so we have Minkyung here, which is, again, the perfect person to talk to us about. Minkyung, you wrote an essay here in the Quarterly Journal, a speech in 2020 titled "Remembering Comfort Women: From On-Screen Storytelling and Rhetoric of Materiality to Rethinking History and Belonging," along with, and I'm going to mess up her name, Julia. I'm going to let you pronounce her name for me because I can't.
Sure.
Please just tell us a little bit about the essay and kind of what were your goals and behind that. And listeners, we will put the link to the essay so you can read it yourselves. Some of my intelligence level was not able to fully process everything. I had to ask Dan a lot of questions, but that's why I have Minkyung here too. Yeah. I'm really thankful.
We both need to learn a lot.
Yeah, and there's so much to learn. So I just want to kind of give you the mic, Minkyung. Tell us a little about your essay and just tell us about this whole, the comfort women and what we should know about it.
First of all, how was my explanation? Was
it was great.
We don't have time for your, you to feel better about yourself.
Okay, good.
No, you gave a great overview of this very serious and sort of atrocious wartime crime. So my interest in comfort women kind of sprouted when I was a little kid, when we started to learn about the Japanese occupation and some of the really negative ramifications and consequences that we had to deal with as a society. One of them being the comfort women. And so basically they were abducted, young teenage to young women, not just from South and North Korea, but also from Taiwan, the Philippines, from China. A lot of Asian women were abducted to serve in war brothels, to serve as a sex slavery. So this is a form of sort of wartime slavery and crime. And knowing about those really atrocious history always kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. And I didn't really know what else to do. And many, many, many years later, when I was in graduate school, my co-author, Julia Krepton-Herhage, who is a European, and she comes from this European cultural and historical background where the Nazi occupation, the Holocaust, all of these historical backgrounds kind of resonate with some of these atrocious nature of war crime. I was in her class. She was my professor, and I brought up this idea of comfort women, and I asked her if this is something that we can explore, not from a historical perspective, not from any international diplomacy perspective, but from a communication perspective. And we worked on this paper, and for this to be published in Quarterly Journal of Speech in 2020, it took us 5 years to write that piece. So many revisions, so much research, so much data collection, because we wanted to look at not just the issue, but how the issue evolved to our contemporary modern day society and how the public is interacting with the notion of comfort women and some of these very pivotal spaces in public, like the statues in front of the Japanese embassy in South Korea, where people clothe the statue, where the public demonstrations happen. But also in Hong Kong, in the middle of financial district, there's also a statue of comfort women. There's also a statue of comfort women in different figure in San Francisco. So kind of looking at these different symbols and how the public space is trying to communicate through the statues about this comfort women issue and the historical atrocity. We wanted to find the way to narrate the stories from the comfort women, not from the political standpoint or anything that goes on in the news with the reparation and the sort of the government's decision to either accept or whatnot.
So many questions. Let's start with what you just ended on. The reparations portion. I read in what little I could understand. I apologize. I just wish my brain was smarter. But I it's a really good essay, y'all. You need to, again, we'll put the link in. The reparations. One part that really struck me in your essay was that obviously within Asian Confucius culture, the Japanese were unwilling to admit that they did this because it was obviously a big no-no and shame, and they don't like that. So Dan kind of alluded to this before, but like the Japanese have not really. They said, "I'm sorry, you feel bad about it," kind of apology. I'm getting from that. It's one of those little lame apologies. What's the status of that? Like, do people? I guess there's the international community. What have they done to push this and at least just get recognition for these women who really went through this that were not acknowledged?
From what I know, there were some efforts that was organized on a global sphere to kind of facilitate a proper reparation, because a lot of these comfort women are suffering in poverty. Their sort of post-war life is just beyond imaginable. A lot of them suffered from illnesses, also poverty. A lot of them died young, couldn't have family, couldn't even return to South Korea. So we're seeing some really extreme ends of their lives. And the women who are still surviving, who are still sort of organizing sort of this, not protest, but demanding their right but to the public eyes, where the Japanese government should openly, publicly, and sincerely recognize the crime that they have conducted and then apologize, and then followed by a proper reparation. All of that's just been protested. There's been a lot of tension. Japanese governments denying that they did it, or sometimes saying, oh, it was just during the wartime. That's how it just went. We're not responsible for it because it happened in history. Whereas you see the German government admitting what happened during the Holocaust and the World War I-II period, which really projects a very different picture of how on a national level they're handling with this pastime atrocity.
So could you, growing up in Germany or spending some of your formative years there, I've never visited there, could you tell us how the German government has openly grappled with their Nazi history?
So I also don't have direct experiences because I was young, and at that time I didn't really know much about the history of Germany and why they were divided and whatnot. It was much later when I learned about the Holocaust in high school and learned about Hitler, and it was fascinating information to learn about. Definitely very, very sad and horrible. But from the news, I would occasionally see a photo of the Prime Minister of Germany paying respect to the Holocaust Memorial in
Yes.
Germany around sometime. I forget the month, but it was a repeated action to really openly acknowledge. And to this day, when you mention Holocaust or World War II or Hitler, that's the biggest shame for Germany. Whereas in Japan, you bring up comfort women, there's a fight.
Yeah.
One of the sort of artifact that we analyze in the essay is this wonderful documentary directed by Tiffany Cheung called The Apology that captures the comfort women's journey, not just the Korean comfort women, but also the ones in the Philippines, the ones in China, kind of having to deal with both the tension with the public as well as their family because they couldn't share that they were comfort women. In Asian culture, that's a shameful past.
Yeah.
Women are shamed if you were in a war brothel, even if it was being abducted and was by force. So these women have to live with that baggage for the rest of their lives. And the Japanese government is sort of making a kind of brushing it off their shoulder, saying, oh, okay, here's what we can do. But it's not enough, and it's not sincere in ways that these women can accept. So it's been an ongoing battle for decades and decades and decades.
Wow. Yeah, and I had just heard this. I never have a good source because my memory is terrible. But I had heard this in a discussion with someone recently that, with the Holocaust, Germany being a Protestant nation, and again, Western culture being more of a guilt-driven culture, and Asian culture, East culture, is more shame-driven. Like you said, the guilt of the Holocaust Nazi party, it's illegal to be part of a Nazi party or anything resembling a Nazi party in Germany. That they put their guilt out there and they acknowledge it. They weren't allowed to have an army for so long, according to the treaty afterwards. But then the difference, like you said, of like an East Asia or Confucius culture that's based on shame
is to kind of cover it up.
Yes, to cover it. And Dan and I always talk about, we make fun of this a lot in terms of Korean culture, because we have it too, obviously, where we cover up things instead of owning up to them just because the shame, is unbearable. Right. And that's understandable too. If it's baked into the culture that it is unbearable to do that, you can have some empathy, but these are the darker consequences.
And there's dark consequences of Western guilt-based culture as well.
And what was so interesting, and I don't remember why this triggered it, but even the name comfort women, it sounds so harmless.
Yeah.
Comfort women. Oh, they were just there to comfort, but these are sex slaves. According to your article, even worse than that. They were worse than just objects. They were just there, Can
I ask you a question?
Yeah.
If,
me or her?
You.
Me, okay.
Since you spent some time in Japan, and if there's nothing to say, then whatever.
Yeah.
But did the topic ever come up in Japan for you in your time in Japan? And if so, how did the citizens feel about it? Do you know?
That topic, no.
Yeah.
But there was a funny, I shouldn't say funny, but there was a man I was with who I deeply respect. He's Japanese. Actually, he's one of the more funnier people I've ever met. And we were in a car ride, this is actually a secondhand story, but he was in a car ride, and he was actually making fun of how the U.S. bombed, used the nuclear bombs because a foreigner was commenting about how there's no development here in this, and then he just kind of passingly said oh, because you bombed us. Again, he wasn't being insensitive, he was just being funny. But he is someone that for sure would acknowledge it, but I do think he is the minority. He understands the repercussions, and actually it was very powerful in that it's very powerful when you see someone even from Germany seek reconciliation for the sins of the past, right?
Yeah.
Even if they were not in that or not from that generation, it's just generational. I think that's very powerful. And I do think, so that's something I did see in Japan, they were really emotional anecdotes I heard. Again, I didn't experience any of these, but these were just told to me through the circles I was in, that there were for example, like a pastors' conference of Koreans coming to Japan, and the Japanese pastors like weeping and apologizing for what Japan did to Korea. Not necessarily for comfort women, but I mean all of it.
All of it, yeah.
And I thought that was very powerful.
All of the occupation was seen as a horrific experience for South Korea, which is why North Korea got such a
yes
beef with them.
So again, and listeners, we always push this on our podcast. It's like the world is nuanced.
Yes.
So we don't want you to walk away thinking, "Oh my God, Japanese are terrible," and they don't acknowledge this. It's similar to North Korea. We always say that the North Koreans are not the North Korean government, right? They are under a system that doesn't allow them to be who they are. But again, to your point, Minkyung, like this did happen, and there is consequence today of denial, and these poor women who went unremembered, right? Some of them are still alive today. Is that correct?
Only a few. Very few, and they are in their 90s, so in the limelight of their lives. So that's why things need to speed up, which makes these women even more active when they could be, relaxing and enjoying their lives. But they're, trying to, because it's them. They are the ones who experienced this very horrific moments decades ago. We're just the descendants who hear the stories in so many different channels. What we can do is to support their endeavors in ways that we can. And for me, as an academic, these are the types of efforts that I can make to bring this to our attention, because you can flip through so many academic journals, and sure, they do research about comfort women, but oftentimes it's about the political diplomacy, what's going on between Korea-Japan relationship. That's important. But we wanted to make sure that we can showcase the voices of the women. What are they going through? How are they engaging in this space? What can we do to re-invite them to be the sole owners of that experience so they can tell their story? And that becomes sort of that empowering space for them.
Are there any like media formats right now where these women are telling their stories? And that's not the thing, like you mentioned this in the article about like these statues, for example, they could be triggering to someone who sees that and lived that, and especially in such a hush topic of Eastern history. What is out there now that you feel like our listeners could go and like see and learn or hear their stories? Is there something out there now that does that?
I mean, definitely these statues, and they're now in so many different places of the world. There's one in Germany.
I saw one in Chicago. I don't know if it was a temporary one.
Oh, yeah. And there's also one in Japan. And
oh, really?
Clearly, and it's by the Korean embassy in Japan. And that's been a site of vandalism.
Wow.
So that's why the statues are so powerful too, because it's being this space of communication where people would express their frustration or empathy or compassion. People dress the statues up, they vandalize it. So that becomes another space where these sort of issues are being explored to the public size. There are, movies have been made, documentaries have been made. What's the title? There's, it's a fiction based on real story, a movie, I forget the title, but a comfort woman learning English so she can go to the U.S. Congress to generate awareness about this issue by giving a speech in English to tell the story of her experience of being a comfort woman, which I didn't even know that was produced, but I saw the movie on a plane and I was like, wait, I thought this had something to do with grandma learning English, but there was a deeper message to that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have a question because from what I've read, the Japanese government has given a couple of excuses, and I wonder what the response is because I'm not as well read about this topic as I am of North Korea. So one thing I heard the Japanese government say repeatedly is that these women wanted to go, right? And what is... I can't imagine that, but maybe, yeah. So, is there a general response to that rebuttal?
So I'm not 100% sure what the Korean government did in response to that. One of the most recent claim that was made by a professor at Harvard University, I think it was Harvard law professor, making that claim, saying, oh, these were voluntary. They were voluntarily joining the brothel as sex slaves.
To support the war.
Exactly. Right. It was not voluntary, right?
Was this Harvard law professor Japanese even?
No,
it was like
American. He was a white American, Caucasian American professor who made that claim, which was like, I think about a year ago or whatnot. And he repeatedly made that claim. It was published. So I know that a bunch of Korean scholars, Korean academics signed a petition to argue against and asking him to rectify that false claim. And I don't know the tail end of that story, whether it's just an ongoing dispute or if there's been a resolution. And then in 2015 or 2016, I think the Japanese government did make some kind of gesture for reparation. Still not to a degree where what the comfort women had the victims had, demanded. And the Korean government at that time, I believe, ended up kind of agreeing to that deal or whatever the reparation amount was, which also became another item of dispute because the comfort women were not, there was no sincerity based on how I read the media report. And it is in no way close to, the amount of reparation was not sort of on par with what it should be. Not that it's, a financial matter, but
it was an insulting amount.
Exactly. Given the length of suffering that these women had to go through for decades, their lives ruined, their childhood, their young adulthood, even their family lives in jeopardy, the way the Japanese government tried to make that negotiation was just very insulting. And I think that's why the fight continues. That's why these women are, relentlessly sort of kind of still fighting, still advocating for their rights, still advocating for their rights.
I went to a protest in South Korea covering it as a journalist in front of the Japanese embassy. And there was a woman, a South Korean woman who was a speaker. Very passionate, and I think she's the most famous woman who also yelled at one of the South Korean presidents at the airport or something. It was a very dramatic scene. There's this one YouTube video that I caught, but it is incredible that these women in South Korean and Asian culture would even come out and say that I was a comfort woman. Right. In America, there's a lot of people recently who've come out and said, I've been sexually abused by so-and-so. And that is brave in and of itself in a culture that is where that subject is not as taboo for the woman. But in South Korea, that context, how brave are these women to even acknowledge something like that? It's so crazy.
Absolutely. It's empowering for me as an individual, but also as a woman. And I wish there are other things that we can do to support their endeavor. And I'm constantly mind-boggled with what can I do? What can I do other than writing a paper about it? I wish there's some actual help that I can provide, support that I can provide. And there's an organization called, I think it's House of Reconciliation or House of Healing, that does try to support these comfort women and help them sort of their voices to be heard. So the documentary that I mentioned, directed by Tiffany Sheung, is very informative for that reason, because you get to see all these different types of grassroots organizing that's trying to support these women to have a voice in this space. So they're the ones organizing trips for them to fly to Europe to talk about their experiences, to kind of share that experience with the larger public, generate awareness and about this atrocity that has been hidden and sort of hushed down, kind of swept under the rug for so many years. So.
If I could just give our listeners a little more context, because I feel like this is something that took me some time to learn, being that I'm way more American than Korean. This Confucius kind of like the whole is greater than the individual parts is like a very Eastern culture, and this is what Dan's talking about with why this is so difficult and why he made that Me Too kind of comparison. I just want listeners to really understand this fully, that, and this is something that I had a hard time understanding too, because I grew up in a very individualistic. We live in a very individualistic society here in the West, specifically America. For someone in Asia to go against the groupthink, is very, not just difficult, it's painful. It's as painful for you to give up your freedom of speech. That's how painful it is. For someone to suppress my freedom of speech, something for me to say whatever I want on this podcast, I would be enraged. I would be really upset. Like, no, you can't tell me what to say. That's very American. And that's not wrong. But just to give you context of what it's like for these women to speak out against this,
thank you for adding that.
like that is how hard it is. That's how it feels. And it's on the other end of it, which is really hard for us to understand. It was hard for me to understand for a long time. Like, this is why I have a big disconnect with my parents sometimes about like them telling me to dress up or something stealing, or I'm going to like shame the family because I look like a slob. I come in a bathrobe. I never told them about that. I would never. But like, you know, to them, that's like egregious, and not just egregious. It's almost like unnatural. Right? It's going against their nature. And if you guys want to add to this, please do so. I just really want to paint the picture for you listeners out there to understand the courage of these women to stand up against this. This is like more than just going against something that's against you. It's like against your own nature to do this. Like, you're going against yourself to do it too.
And just to be clear, I am not in any way saying that the women who came out for Me Too were in any way not brave, because that, I'm just saying that in itself was super brave of them to do. But in Asian culture, for these older women to come out and say that, it took an extra amount of courage.
Because historically, I mean, the Confucius culture has been dominating the way Asians communicate and the way Asians view gender roles, the way Asians view women's voice and positionality in the family and in the society. So collective harmony, for example, is so important. So even if you're suffering, if it's you individual suffering, and by you speaking up, that's going to wreck the collective harmony, oh, no way. You should just hush, hush. And
Chama.
exactly, because patience is virtue. And that 5 pillar of respecting the head of the family. And if you're a woman, just be a good caregiver, be the quiet one. You don't have a voice. And it's back in the days, that probably was even more severe and constraining than it is now. And for women at that time, men were always superior. Men always were over women.
I would say it's still like that in Korea.
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
much.
It's slowly changing, and it really varies by different family and their upbringing and their ideology and perspectives. But in general, women's rights are still being questioned. And there's a lot of movements in the recent era where women started to voice their perspectives and opinions and tried to claim that right and sort of right over their own body, over their own life and their choices and whatnot. But for comfort women who were living in that early 1900s, who had no power and agency, just could not talk about it because it brings shame. It's a past that people are just hiding, right? So to be able to speak up about it, that not only takes courage and bravery, but also it's a huge step forward for all women in Asia too. And that's why I think their voices are so powerful, and that agency should be recognized in ways that really empower them, but the rest of the community too.
What are some? You mentioned this movie, The Apology. Are there any other maybe mainstream form? Well, even in South Korea, like, are there more of the? You mentioned a movie that you saw. Do you feel like this is becoming more of a, maybe even at the minimum, like a good story to tell on film? Because I mean, it is rife with drama. Obviously, God knows we do that in America all the time. We take all the most impactful stories about slavery or indigenous peoples, and we make those into films. Do you feel like that's happening in South Korea at all right now, or maybe even in Japan? I don't know, because again, not all Japanese people are on board with that ideology of silencing this.
I mean, Japan, I can't really say because I'm not sure. For Korea, there's been some movies, and this documentary. I would say the documentary production is more international because the director is not Korean. I think I remember watching a lot of documentary rather than fiction storytelling. Of course, there was that movie, and I'm sure there are others too. I haven't really watched a lot of comfort women related like movies, and not that I can think of, because I think there were more North Korean related movies than some other historical sort of,
it's a tough history to
turning
film
points
to broach.
Because I think because it's still an ongoing battle, it's so sensitive to, I don't even know where to begin. But then again, I could be wrong. There could be other pieces that may not have been under my radar, or maybe they were independent films, or maybe they were only released to certain theaters or something like that. Yeah.
And that's true. Like, even here in American media, you see, and I'm some people in the film community might come after me, but whatever. They don't listen to this. Movie like Platoon. In Platoon, you see very gratuitous raping of Vietnamese women, and
The Vietnam War.
and there's actually a lot of movies, American movies, that like show it, but it's more of as an incitement to watch the movie entertainment. It's rarely about the women or the people, that perspective, which actually is a really unique perspective, in my opinion. But I do see that even for those things. So I think, any writers out there, here's an opportunity of like telling stories. You want to tell unique stories. Here's a very tragic, but like you said, a story that needs to be heard and known. I remember I was talking to someone earlier this week, and I told them we were doing this podcast and we're talking about comfort women. They had no idea what it was. It was a younger person too, which it just made me think, like you said, the generation of comfort women is dying out now. I hope this doesn't go into history books as like something that's forgotten. Which would be sad, but hopefully it doesn't go that way. And thank you to you and your article that now it's on the web. It can be searched.
There's actually even simplified version that was published at the Korea Times.
Oh.
So that's like more reader friendly.
That's shorter. You can say it to me. It's okay. I accept. You can say it's your version.
No, because like usually academic journals are like 20 some pages. It's too long. It's theoretical, but we kind of
a lot of citations.
Tweak that into a more digestible, like really short 1 page ish, which has been really helpful because that has better reachability to the general public and for them to kind of learn about it. Because
if you could send us the link, we'll put it in the show notes.
And if even on Google, if you type "before it's too late," the Korea Times, it'll probably be the first thing that pops up.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I wish I knew that like 2 weeks ago.
You were researching.
Yeah, I didn't know you were gonna check out my CV. If I had known, I would have sent you the.
We do heavy research here, Minkyung.
I like that.
We prep hard.
I like that. Everything from research.
That was sarcastic.
Fact checking.
We don't fact check anything here.
No, when it comes to research, I never take it as a sarcastic meme. But I mean, I try to kind of talk about this in classes too, because like a few years ago, I taught a course on persuasion communication, and there was a very short film, kind of like an animation film. No words are being exchanged, just visual and just music. And I showed it to students, and I had them guess what this is all about. Nobody knew. They all thought, oh, some Asian film? What's it about? About the war? So it's like, did you all hear about comfort women at some point? And they're like, nope. So, history is only taught from a certain perspective. And comfort women does not really have a large place in American history curriculum. I know that. So I also feel that it's my job to kind of help students to see what goes on outside of their, local surrounding. And comfort women is an important international issue that has implications on not just the war, crime, and the atrocity itself, but also about gender, women's rights, feminist rights, and then empowerment and voice. So I feel like I'm weighing down the conversation now.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. We'll
So
even edit that
interesting.
part out. Don't worry. Minkyung, thank you so much for being here with us. It's been, like I said, you've just pushed our IQ points up like 50 or 60 maybe.
Yeah, definitely.
We're like Forrest Gump. We're like right below that line, the two of us together. But having you here has been really nice and informational. We'd love to have you back. Please.
Yeah, that would be great. And I mean, if you read the 25-page QJS article, don't sell yourself short. That's,
Well, I know how to read. Hey listeners, if you'd like to make a real impact in the lives of North Korean refugees, please consider donating. Go to crossingbordersnk.org and click on the donate button in the upper right. It's so easy, your aging appa can do it by himself without FaceTiming you first thing in the morning for help with his iPhone.